Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. With Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon, here's your host, Matt Jones.
We said it last week on the podcast, it's feeling a lot like the 1990s with the Razorback basketball team. Just continue to have a lot of parallels to those years, most recent being that the Razorbacks went down to Gainesville on Tuesday night and beat Florida at the O'Connell Center. First time the Razorbacks have won a game at Florida since 1995. Broke a 14-game losing streak there. That was Arkansas's longest at any opposing arena. Now the Razorbacks, speaking of the 90s, have a big matchup with Kentucky at Bud Walton Arena, one of the biggest that they've had here in Fayetteville in quite some time. Kentucky will come in ranked number 6. Arkansas is number 18 in the AP poll. Maybe more importantly than the rankings, though, Kentucky number 2 in the SEC standings, Arkansas number 3 with a few games left in the SEC season. Arkansas still has a chance to potentially, with some help, win the SEC regular season title. Matt Jones with Bob Holt of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and Scotty Bordelon and Andrew Joseph of WholeHogSports.com. Bob, you've seen a lot of teams go down to Gainesville, a lot of good teams go down to Gainesville and struggle against Florida. What were your thoughts watching them win the other night and finally kind of get that monkey off their back?
Well, I guess my thought was the next time they go to Florida, I don't have to write the losing streak angle, which probably the last 5 or 6 times they've gone down there, I've written that because it just kept getting longer and longer. You know, Florida had a Zoom Monday. I asked Mike White about it. He'd been 4-0 against Arkansas in Gainesville since succeeding Billy Donovan, who won his last 10 against them down there. And Mike was in high school in New Orleans, Jesuit, when Arkansas last won there. And he said it's got to end sometime, and just talked about what a great program Arkansas is and how, you know, it's just there's some weird stats that happen that just don't make a lot of sense. But sometime ended up being Tuesday night, and I definitely thought Arkansas could win. You know, looking it up, this was and maybe this was a premonition, but this was the first time since 1995 that Arkansas had played down there as a ranked team when Florida was not ranked. You know, they lost to a lot of good Florida teams. Obviously, Billy Donovan had back-to-back national champions and a couple other Final Four teams, but still, you thought Arkansas would have won down there, and they really should have won in 2015. They got a really bad call late. And if you ask Matt Zimmerman about it, he'll tell you all about it. But it was the one time I can remember Mike Anderson calling out an official publicly in the press conference, John Hampton, who apparently was friends with Billy Donovan and John Pelfrey. And the Arkansas just felt like they got hosed on a call. But yeah, it was when Florida was winning by 6, you know, with less than 8 minutes to play, you think, wow, is Florida going to do it again? Because they are a good team. Not as good as Arkansas, but they were at home, and I guess I'm just glad. It was just kind of fun to write about a win at Florida, even though I wasn't there. I was coming remotely this time, but it was definitely overdue. The Arkansas was overdue to end that streak for sure, and did a good job of coming back as they've done in a lot of these wins recently.
Scotty, I thought that game and a lot of games recently have they're starting to change the perception, I think, that people have of Arkansas basketball. You know, it felt like that Florida game was playing out like we've seen so many games play out against Florida, or, you know, just games period over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But I think what Eric Musselman's doing is that he's changing the confidence that people have in his team, and probably changing the confidence that the team has in itself. Although a lot of these players, you know, are recycled every year or 2 years, it just felt like everything was kind of unraveling on him with about 8 or 9 minutes left. Jalen Williams picks up his 4th foul. Colin Castleton is looking unstoppable for Florida, and he sticks with Jalen Williams. The faith pays off. Williams makes a lot of plays down the stretch. Devo Davis played as well down the stretch as I think he has in any game since he's been at Arkansas. Note made some big plays. I don't know. It just feels to me, what are your thoughts on this? It just feels to me like the perception is changing of Arkansas basketball, in part because they're making plays in these games that we just haven't seen them do a whole lot in the past.
I think you're 100% right. And the thing that I keep coming back to is just this group's resolve. Like, they'll find themselves down, and Bob wrote about this today on our site. He goes through every instance where Arkansas was either trailing or tied in the second half of a game and, you know, ended up pulling it out. But I think you're right about the perception, especially on the road. like Arkansas teams in the past, no slight to Mike Anderson, but his teams would take a punch on the road and they would just like wilt. There is no back, there's no back down in this group that Eric Musselman's got right now. Like they go down 5-6 points on a couple of occasions in the second half at Florida, and they just respond by making, multiple effort plays, toughness plays. Like Audis Tony, I remember I think he missed 2 layups around the rim, which is kind of what he's dealing with right now. But he followed that second miss by going and grabbing another offensive rebound. He gets a foul call, goes to the line, and that, I don't know if that kick started a run or not, but that's just the kinds of plays that Arkansas just continually makes now. I think, especially away from home, those are the types of plays that you got to have to find success away from home. And now Arkansas has won 5 of his last 6 on the road, and I think they've won 10 games away from home the last 2 seasons, and they won, I think, a combined 8 the previous 3. So Mike Anderson's last 2 seasons and Eric Musselman's first, they won 8. They're just, the perception, I just think now I give Arkansas a shot in every game they play. Like the run that they're on, these last 13 games, they've at least been in every game or won every game. And I give them at least a fighter's chance to go compete and win every game, because that's just kind of the makeup of this team. They're not going to back down. They're going to fight. And they play as hard or harder than I think anybody in the country.
One of the things I was really impressed with the other night was just the ability for Arkansas to get to the rim. I mean, there were so many times where Florida would hit a 3 or make a big shot, and Arkansas really quickly would get down the floor and get right to the rim. I'd be interested to know how many points they had, right at the rim, fast break, transition type points, because it seemed like it was quite a few. And I don't know that we've seen that a whole lot out of them this year.
Getting points in transition is what they're going to have to do to be successful down the stretch, because they're not fantastic 3-point shooting team, even with Devo Davis's emergence from beyond the arc of late. But I think they have guys that can get to the rim and draw fouls, even if they can't convert at the rim. But the getting in the paint is where they're going to get most of their offensive production, where they have this season. And I think we'll see that continue.
Well, yeah, I just think they haven't been a super fast break team this season, but going to the rim and drawing fouls and getting the free throw line, that's been a good recipe for Arkansas in a lot of games. There's been a couple where maybe the refs just let both teams play pretty physical, didn't call a lot of free throws. I think they ended up hitting 17-20 the other night, and that's been a good place for them to get to. You look at Tony and Likes, I think they were combined 2 of 12 from the field against Tennessee, but 12 of 12 from free throw lines. So, Tony's really a good free throw shooter. If I'm Arkansas, I feel real good when he goes to the line. And I think he's improved his free throw percentage like over 10% from last season at Pittsburgh. That's a huge jump. And Likes is a very good free throw shooter, and he's a good guy to have in there late as long as he's not turning the ball over. So I think getting to the rim and getting the free throw line, that's been a good recipe for Arkansas. That's something they're going to have to continue to do to close out the regular season strong, and then make a good postseason run, whether it's in Tampa or the NCAA tournament.
Eric Musselman hit the nail on the head, I think, after the Tennessee game, when he said they're not the most cosmetically pleasing or aesthetically pleasing offensive team. I think that, you can't say it much better than that. Like, they're really not. Like, sometimes you'll watch this Arkansas team and you'll kind of wonder like how they're going to get their offense, and then they end up scoring 82 points on the road. But it's not always like the prettiest thing. And the transition buckets are really important, getting out and running. They're averaging like 10 points, 10 fast break points a game inside the conference, which is, that's not a great number considering, the athletes Arkansas's got in its rotation. But they're, that almost 13 second chance points per game. Like, those are just, I feel like a lot of the buckets Arkansas is getting now are toughness buckets. And then I don't know that you can continue to rely on Devo from 3, but he's been pretty steady lately. I think 2 of 3 and 4 of the last 5 games. but not the greatest offensive team, but they just find a way, and I can't really explain it. But it helps to have a guy like JD who can, get a shot from pretty much anywhere, get into the teeth of a defense, and um, create for others, and obviously get plenty of buckets himself.
Going back to the free throw shooting, and they draw as many fouls as anyone in the conference. I thought it was interesting to hear Eric Musselman say earlier this week in the press conference that they had, I think it was Note, he said that told him that he felt like they had more pressure on them to shoot free throws in practice than they do in the games. That shows there's a clear emphasis on getting those points at the line.
And I don't think you can overstate the importance of Jalen Williams to the offense and what they've found with him over the last, say, month and a half or so. Just the ability for him to find people with his passes, and it seems like it's creating a lot better shots than what we were seeing earlier in the season. And I guess this is time for our Jalen Williams appreciation moment that we have just about every podcast. Going back to how well he played at Florida, 15 points, 10 rebounds. I thought if Arkansas lost, the game-changing moment was going to be when he picked up the second foul with about 6 or 7 seconds left in the first half. Kind of a silly reach-in foul. Colin Castleton's 90 feet away from the rim. Picks up his third foul pretty early in the second half, and then gets that fourth foul with about 8 minutes left. And just the ability to play with those 4 fouls and the trust that Musselman and his coaching staff showed him, just really impressive what Jalen Williams did at Florida. And I don't think they win that game if they sit him for 3 or 4 minutes and try to bring him back in at the last media timeout, like you might see some coaches do with the player in foul trouble. Keeping him on the floor just really gave the team a steady presence, and I thought that was the key to their end of game run.
Yeah, Eric talked about when he got the 4th foul, and Castleton drew and hit a couple free throws that they switched. I think they put Adis or maybe it's Stanley on Castleton, and so that obviously created less chances for Jalen to foul out. But yeah, he's a pretty heady guy, and of course he still took his charges. I think he took 3 again, which is just mind-boggling to me. I don't mean like these teams are going to stop driving the lane, but
including one, Bob, with 4 fouls. He took a charge with 4 fouls.
Yeah, that was gutsy, and I do think it helps. The referees, they're human. They read stuff. They probably see the charge counter, and I think they're very aware that this guy takes a lot of charges, and he seems to have such a good personality. I have to imagine when he's talking with refs before the game, he's a guy they would like. I'm sure they, like a lot of players in the league or players they call games for, but I think he's developed a reputation for taking charges. So if it's a bang bang play, well, it's block or charge, man. Even if you watch it in slow motion, I can't tell. He's probably going to get that call most of the time just because of how well he's done. But that was a gutsy play to take that. And then he hit a big 3 to give him the lead temporarily, and then Stanley hit another 3 to give him the lead for good. But yeah, you think about, he's just such a good passer. He's obviously looking to score more now. He's a great rebounder, takes the charges. They're just really anything that he doesn't do pretty well. There's some things he does better than others, but he's a pretty complete player for a guy that's still, he's just a sophomore. He's still very young and has a lot of room to grow, no doubt.
We were kind of shooting the breeze with Jalen after the Tennessee game. We were waiting on Devo to come into the press conference room, and we're talking to him. I mentioned to him, I asked if he knew that he had 10 boards at halftime, and he said he kind of quipped and said, "Yeah, I should have had 20." This dude is just ultra confident. And then he dropped a little nugget that I found really interesting. He said that officials sometimes come up to him before games and ask him how many charges he thinks he's going to take that game. And that's kind of the reputation he's built. And I didn't honestly, there was obviously Rick Barnes kind of got on his soapbox about the block charge call after they lost at Arkansas. I didn't think there was much doubt whatsoever in the charges that he took at Florida. I remember thinking after the first couple that he took, I was like, I don't know how this dude just keeps taking these body blows like willingly. He takes them right in the chest and falls on his tailbone several times a game. And I think the worst thing that can happen to Jalen is when he tries to take a charge, but there's like no call, or the play was blown dead right before he took a hit, and it's just a kind of a body blow. that goes for naught. He changes so many things just with his presence on the floor. Like since Arkansas in the last 13 games, I just looked up Arkansas shooting 47% on threes that he sets up. And so his vision is unbelievable. And obviously he's on the scoring tear that he's ever had. And he's rebounding. Like if Oscar Tshiebwe didn't exist, Jalen would be the best rebounder in the SEC. I don't think it would really be that close. And he helps so much with the flow of the offense that he's one of the more valuable players in the league. And I just don't see how there's a way that he doesn't land on one of the two all SEC teams. I think he's certainly got a spot carved out for him on that all defensive team.
Yeah, we've talked about the all SEC teams. It's going to probably depend on, is it a position specific all SEC team or is it something else? If it's position specific, you've got Tshiebwe and you've got the big guy at Auburn, Walker Kessler. It's going to be a battle for Williams to get on the all SEC teams with those guys, but he's certainly, to me, he's playing all SEC. I think I read, didn't I, that he's wearing pads under his jersey that's helping him absorb some of those blows. So I think the padding and maybe the chiropractors over at Millennium, those are the things that are keeping Jalen Williams going from game to game. Talking about the Tennessee game, that was an ugly one for the Razorbacks, but I think the sign of a good team is the ability to win a game that may be a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And they've been really good about holding teams to low scoring, but in, a lot of those games where they're holding teams down, Arkansas is still getting, in the 65 to 70 point range. This one was a little bit different because they weren't shooting real well. Tennessee's an awfully good defensive team too. And the Florida game was big for them. But the Tennessee game, I think, was equally as big, even though it was at home, in terms of, building up that postseason resume. And, it's really put Arkansas in a nice position here with 3 games left.
Yeah, if Arkansas can beat Kentucky, and I'd say that's probably a toss-up game here. A lot of it depends on if Kentucky's guards are healthy enough. If you watch the game last night and last Saturday when Kentucky beat Alabama, beat LSU last night, Wheeler and Washington, they're two primary ball handlers have not played, but they found a way to win, even though it looked like they might blow that LSU game last night. They had a big lead. But, if Arkansas can beat Kentucky and beat LSU, I think it'll really be hard for them to win at Tennessee. But, they're trending up to where they maybe could get up to a 3-4 seed, and that can make a big difference. I mean, the NCAA tournament's a lot about matchups, but it's the higher seed you can go, obviously on paper, the little easier, path you might have to get into a regional final or a Final Four.
I think it was interesting looking at KenPom after Arkansas beat Tennessee, and I looked at Arkansas's, I think it's under the game plan tab on Arkansas's page. They posted their worst offensive efficiency rating of the season, and they beat the number 16 team by double figures. John Fulkerson was a non-factor. He's the kind of guy that can go for Tennessee into a road venue and just kind of create chaos and kind of thrive. He was just not a factor whatsoever in that game. And Arkansas did a pretty good job on Tennessee's 2 primary ball handlers, like outside of Vescovi, Kennedy Chandler and Zakai Ziegler. Those 2 guys, I mean, they had their moments, but they did not have anywhere close to the types of games that they had, become accustomed to previously. Can I add one more thing about last Saturday? I go back after each game and I rewatch games and chart several different things. And one of them is shots defended. JD Notae held Tennessee to 5 of 17 shooting. Jalen Williams held Tennessee to 3 of 12. And Stanley Amude held Tennessee to, I think, 3 of 13. I mean, those guys, I think are your 3 of your top 4 defenders, and they really, really stepped up against a team that's got some really talented, quick guards, and might be one of the more rugged front lines in the league. And they more than held their own. And they held a pretty good Tennessee offensive team down. I would imagine 48 points is the least amount of points they've scored in a long, long time.
Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Speaking of the first since 1995, Saturday's game against Kentucky will be the first time that Arkansas and Kentucky have both been ranked for a game at Bud Walton Arena since that matchup on Super Bowl Sunday in 1995. There have been some top 25 matchups between the two of them elsewhere, in Lexington, at the SEC tournament in Atlanta, but this will be the first time that it's happened in Fayetteville in 27 years, and it just speaks to the magnitude of this matchup. I think they've had some big games in Fayetteville. They're going to have another big one against LSU in the midweek next week. They've beaten Auburn, they've beaten Tennessee, but there's just something about playing Kentucky on the weekend that makes this one really big. And, like I said at the outset, if Arkansas can beat Kentucky, then they're going to leave the weekend tied for second place in the SEC. This is a big, big matchup.
Yeah, it's on CBS, which, Kentucky seems like they play every other game on CBS, but for Arkansas, it's the only CBS game this year, I believe. And then I think last year their only CBS game was when Missouri came in here and upset them. You watch Missouri now, and it's hard to believe, but Missouri actually had a pretty good team last year and was ranked as high as number 10. But, when Arkansas first got in the league in the early 90s, 91, 92, they, went toe-to-toe with Kentucky. I remember going to that first media days, and the feeling, generally speaking, and around the SEC was, Arkansas is very good. They're going to come in here and play well, but this is not the Southwest Conference. This is the SEC, and we have Kentucky, and we have LSU and Shaquille O'Neal, and we have, Tennessee and all these teams. And Arkansas, I believe, went 14-2. I know they won the league that year, and they went up to Rupp Arena and spanked Kentucky, and John Pelfrey was on that team, spanked them pretty good. Stopped a long winning streak that Kentucky has in Rupp Arena, like they have a long one right now. Went into LSU and beat Shaquille O'Neal. Arkansas really announced themselves as, hey, we're really good and we're here, and we don't care if it's the SEC. We're going to keep kicking butt just like we did in the Southwest Conference. And Arkansas and Kentucky had some epic games in the first half of the 90s. Usually Arkansas would win the regular season game, whether it was at Rupp or Barnhill or Walton later, and Kentucky would come back and beat them in the conference tournament. But they just had some great games. You had Rick Pitino, Nolan Richardson, two, Hall of Fame coaches, and they both played up and down. And you had great players like Corliss Williamson, Scotty Thurman, and, Day and Mayberry and Miller, and, a lot of great players on Kentucky's side. And that was just a really fun rivalry, and it's good to see it coming back.
And on CBS, again, like you mentioned, this will be the 16th time that Arkansas and Kentucky have played on CBS. The first time was that Super Bowl Sunday matchup, Andrew.
Yeah, I was watching the LSU Kentucky game last night, and I heard them mention they were talking about the upcoming game, Kentucky and Arkansas, and I forget which broadcaster it was, but he mentioned the Auburn crowd that came, or the crowd that came for the Auburn game in Bud Walton Arena, and he said that it was going to be even louder and even more crazy for the Kentucky game, even though they're not the number one team in the country. And I just genuinely don't know how it gets much louder than it was when the Tigers came to town.
Yeah, I'm with you. And this is not to say that the crowd last weekend for the Tennessee game wasn't great and that the crowd wasn't loud. And the readout was awesome. I thought it really, really popped, and pretty fun atmosphere. But man, I can't start comparing everything to the game that Arkansas won against Auburn. because that was just such a special, unique environment. You just got all the animosity that you already feel toward Auburn, and then you throw in the fact that they're number one in the country, and they've got some villainish type guys kind of on their team, and guys that you would really like to hand an L to. I think this Kentucky atmosphere, weather willing, like if the weather the next couple of days holds up and allows people to get to Fayetteville, could match it, possibly exceed it, just because I mean, like there's hate for Kentucky runs in the blood of folks in the state. I think like there's no two ways about that. And then John Calipari's coming here. He's got a good team. Got some really, really good players on his team too. I think it could possibly reach that. I just hope that, the roads are clear enough for us to see if that environment can be matched from the Auburn game.
Yeah, so I guess they had the white out for Auburn, the red out for Tennessee, and now I see where they're doing a stripe out, like one section's white, one section's red. I'm just glad after the other night they're not doing an anthracite out, where everybody's asked to wear gray. Yeah, I think there's something about night games. I mean, believe me, as a writer, I prefer day games for deadlines, but I think there's just something about night games where people get so amped up. And yeah, it's good. And that was a great atmosphere for Tennessee last week. But I remember at some point during the game thinking, yeah, this is really good, but it's not like Auburn. And of course, Auburn was number one and they hadn't lost since the day before Thanksgiving and everything else. And Tennessee has a lot of really good players. I don't know if they have anybody like Jabari Smith. They have some first round draft picks too, probably, but at Tennessee. But yeah, Kentucky, there's just something about Kentucky and especially Calipari that just brings out the venom in Arkansas fans. I used to remember when he got tossed, which I think was planned to fire up his team. The crowd just going crazy. I especially remember seeing video of Dave Van Horn. Dave was there with his wife, Karen, and Dave was going as crazy as any fan in there. And then, but the thing in Arkansas got the lead after the tease, but then Kentucky came back and won. I don't know if I've ever seen Eric Musselman more disappointed after a game. And I know he's only been there 3 years, but he was so down. I remember, he's up there at the table. I'm not even sure he looked up at us. And
Yeah,
that
he
wasn't
didn't at all.
That wasn't any disrespect to us. He was just so down. And I think he talked about it being a missed opportunity because that was the first time they'd had a really super crowd. And I think he just felt like, man, I don't know if we'll ever be able to get that back. We had the lead on Kentucky. We didn't close them out. But obviously, that team rallied late. And I think they would have had a shot to go to the NCAA tournament if the season had been able to play out. We'll never know if they could have won another game in the SEC tournament. And then obviously these last years, they've had these great turnarounds. So the crowds are back. I mean, these are the best crowds. I mean, there have been good crowds throughout the years, especially when Kentucky comes. Think of the Michael Qualls game, Dunk and all that. But these, for like a 3 or 4 game set, I'm sure it'll be crazy for LSU too. This is the best sustained crowd I can remember since probably the late 90s, mid to late 90s.
Keys for the Kentucky game. I think that, it begins, Scotty, with limiting Tshiebwe. How well he plays seems to, Kentucky seems to go with how well he plays. And, this is going to be a great test for Jalen Williams. Talk about, is he an all SEC type player? He held his own in the Auburn game, but I think Tshiebwe, there's something different about this matchup than what he's seen with anybody else this year.
Yeah, Tshiebwe is different, man. And it doesn't take you long watching him to realize that the way he carves out and eats up space is just unbelievable. I think Jalen's going to be up for it though. Like he's as confident of a player as I've seen. I don't know, not going to go back very far here, but like Mason Jones a couple of years ago when he was seemingly scoring 30 points every night. I mean, you can feel the confidence and see the confidence in him when he moves and when he plays. That's going to be really big. Just that matchup. I think Arkansas is going to have to also limit just like some of Kentucky's secondary front court guys. Like Keon Brooks is a guy that's more than capable of. He's a really, really bouncy kid. Him and I think Obi Toppin's brother. both really, really terrific athletes capable of getting on the glass and doing some damage there. So Arkansas is going to have to just be locked in all the way around, 1 through 5. Especially on the defensive glass, and limit second chance opportunities. I think if Kentucky is full strength, that Ty Washington JD Note matchup might be one of the best guard matchups that we've seen in a long time. And if Kentucky is full strength, they'll be really good defensively. And JD's had a lot of success from 3 off the dribble lately. I think he's 7 of his last 11 is what I looked up today. Kentucky's really good defensively, going to make you take some tough shots. And it's nice to have a tough shot maker on your side in JD. So I'm just really looking forward to it. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, Shibwe, the crazy thing is he averages like 16 points and 15 boards. So, I mean, that's what he does night after night. So I think if you're Arkansas, what you got to do is make sure he doesn't get 25 points and 22 boards. He's going to get a double-double. I mean, as long as he doesn't get hurt or get in serious foul trouble. And as Eric Musselman and Jalen Williams, that we talked to them earlier this week, and they stressed that it's going to take a team effort, against Kentucky. And Shibwe, just because he's just so good and he takes up so much space. It'll be interesting to me if Jalen can get him in foul trouble. Like, can he draw a charge, or can he get Shibwe to go over his back trying to get an offensive board? But that's going to be a fun matchup. Then if you watch the LSU game, the Kentucky LSU game, man, Kentucky had a big lead late, and then LSU pressed them, and Kentucky was turning it over like they'd never seen a press. And I know Arkansas is not generally a pressing team, and they shouldn't press Kentucky if Wheeler and Washington are out there. That would not be a good thing to do. But if those two guys don't dress out and can't play, I think it'll be real interesting to see if Arkansas presses Kentucky, because they showed the other night. I mean, they had to call 2 timeouts late in the game to even get the ball inbounds. That's how much they were struggling with it. So the stat, if one of those guys can play, really Kentucky needs one of them to play. But Calipari's smart to hold them out, because you need him healthy in March. You'd love to have him now if you're Kentucky, but you got to have him healthy in March.
Arkansas and Kentucky scheduled to tip off at 1 o'clock on Saturday on CBS. Visit WholeHogSports.com before, during, and after the game for all of our coverage. Going to be a big weekend at Whole Hog Sports. Also, the Razorback baseball team is in Round Rock, Texas for the Round Rock Classic. If you're interested in more baseball coverage, check out the Whole Hog Baseball podcast. You can find it by subscribing to our podcast channel. Search Whole Hog Radio. That's 3 words, WHOLEHOGRADIO, in Apple, Spotify, or most other podcast stores. We'll be back next week with another basketball podcast to Mid-America to review the Kentucky and LSU games and look ahead to the final regular season game at Tennessee. For Bob Holt, Scotty Bordelon, and Andrew Joseph, I'm Matt Jones. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend, everyone.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.